Hey, health students, welcome back to another edition of distance learning Larson style. This is going to be a rather interesting chapter, so to speak, a rather interesting chapter here over the course of the next 4 lessons, and I want to make sure that I give the lecture for that each time. I probably will run out of time on each of these, so whatever I don't get to in each of these, feel free to look at some of the slides that I don't get to if we get cut off. I only get 15 minutes in this version of screencast, so feel free. But I do want to talk through these because this has been interesting because of the world that we're living in right now, and talking about communicable diseases. So here we go. Learning about communicable diseases and how they spread can help you prevent them. The causes of communicable diseases. So communicable diseases are caused by several kinds of microorganisms. If you've ever caught an illness from someone before, you've contracted a communicable disease. Okay, and we talk about communicable diseases, or also known as contagious or infectious diseases. They occur when pathogens enter your body. So to give you a really good explanation or definition of communicable disease.
Communicable disease. A disease that is spread from one living organism to another or through the environment.
So when they talk about communicable disease, it's not just diseases that are transmitted from one person to the next. They talk about living organisms from one to the next, and lots of speculation as to where the coronavirus came from. Some say it might have came from a wet market in Wuhan. Some say it might have been developed from other viruses and genetically altered in a lab. If it were, so to speak, developed from a bat, like they say it would, that's a living organism that's transferred to a human, and then transferred from one human to the next. So living organism to one living organism, or the environment. Your body does not fight off invaders quickly, or if your body doesn't fight off invaders quickly or successfully, you develop the infection. So it's your body's immune system's job to fight those invaders off. So again, infection is the word that we're looking at.
Infection, a condition that occurs when pathogens in the body multiply and damage body cells.
Okay, so there's lots of different ways or different causes of communicable disease. We're dealing with virus right now, but there's bacteria, there's fungi, there's protozoa, and there's rickettsias. So you can look at some of the different types of things that fall under viruses, the common cold, influenza. You can take a peek at that list of things that fall underneath there. There's bacterial infections. Okay, there's foodborne illnesses. There's strep throat. There's tuberculosis, Lyme's disease. These are all bacterial. Then there's different fungi, whether it's ringworm, which could be caught real common with wrestlers that live in different places. Say it could live in a couch, it could live in the carpet, it could live in a wrestling mat, or athlete's foot, which someone could get from showering in a public shower. Okay, there's protozoa, which would be an example of malaria, sleeping sickness, different things like that. And then there's rickettsias, typhus, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, different things like that. So these are what we're dealing with right now in our world of COVID-19 is a virus. Okay, and two of the most common communicable diseases that are considered viruses are the cold and the flu, and are caused by viruses. Or you could talk about coronaviruses. They say coronavirus when they're talking about COVID-19, but there's the reason why the number 19 is after it is because it's the coronavirus that was identified in the year of 2019. That's what it was for. But COVID really talks about, it's an acronym, and the first one is corona. Okay, and there's many different types of coronaviruses that are out there.
Virus, a piece of genetic material surrounded by a protein code.
Okay, and they say there's a protein code that surrounds these types of viruses, okay, and that protects it. Okay, but if you look at viruses and how that gets into the body. Okay, the virus invades living cells. The virus begins to multiply. It starts to take over the body's cells. The disease sets in. Then the body's immune system jumps into action and starts to fight against those things. Okay, the virus is usually killed by the immune system, but as the immune system starts to do its job, not only does it kill the virus, but it starts to attack different areas of the body, and that's the biggest thing right now that's happening with some of the huge issues with the lungs, because this is a respiratory virus. The immune system becomes really overactive, so active that it's trying to kill the virus, but it starts to kill lung tissue, and people have got some serious lung damage that's taking place with coronavirus. Hey, bacterias, they live almost everywhere on the earth.
Bacteria, single-celled microorganisms.
Most bacteria is harmless. Some are even helpful, like the ones that help you digest food. Unfortunately, some bacteria is or does cause disease. So the thing that gets to be somewhat controversial right now when it comes to the world that we're living in is people are saying that we should be wearing masks when we go places, or wearing rubber gloves when we touch certain things. And the only thing that's the downfall is, yes, it's protecting you from what could potentially be something invading the body, or a virus or a bacteria, but the body needs a certain amount of bacteria. The body needs, the immune system needs to be active in fighting against pathogens, and when we don't allow it to do its job, now we weaken our immune system. So that's really, there's doctors out here right now that are saying, yes, we should be wearing masks when we are in a situation where we're around could potentially contract the virus, but at the same time, you shouldn't wear it all the time. At home, outside, your body needs to be exposed to certain bacteria, especially healthy bacteria.
Toxin, a substance that kills cells or interferes with their functions.
Okay, antibiotics do not work against viruses, so you can see that there's nothing that you can do as far as taking an antibiotic to kill a virus, but bacterial disease is what people sometimes use antibiotics to treat. So a bacterial disease can often be treated with antibiotics. However, some bacteria have become resistant to antibiotics as the bacteria has evolved. So there gets to be a little bit of a problem over time if every single time you get a bacterial infection, you take an antibiotic. Now you're enabling the immune system to do its job to fight against it, and the bacteria becomes resistant. Every time it sees that antibiotic, the bacteria starts to get smarter and start to build up a resistance to it. So the more you take antibiotics over time, the less effective they become. So factors that influence teens, fungi, protozoa, rickettsias, okay, the plant-like organisms that can cause disease of lungs, mucous membranes, and the skin would be a fungi. Protozoa are single-celled microorganisms that are larger, more complex than bacteria. And then rickettsias, microorganisms that enter the body through insect bites. So you start thinking about certain things that can happen to the body from an insect bite. Think about some of these other things that are out there, whether it's West Nile, whether it's Lyme's disease. These are different insect bites. Okay, so how disease spreads. Diseases can be transmitted in a variety of different ways. Knowing how diseases are transmitted is your first line of defense against them. So if we start thinking about how coronavirus is spread from person to person, we need to know how it's transmitted. And right now, it's what's called airborne, which means it can be breathed in. It can be on the surface of something that you touched, and then you touch your face, you touch your eyes, you touch your mouth, your nose, an area where it's a mucous membrane where that pathogen can enter the body really quickly, and now infection can start, especially if it's a respiratory disease, because it's going to go right where it needs to, which is in the nose or the mouth and right into the lungs. So how pathogens spread: direct contact with a person that's infected, sometimes puncture wounds, if there is an opening in the skin someplace and a pathogen gets in through that opening and into the bloodstream, childbirth from mother to child, or contact with infected animals. So we talked about with coronavirus, there's the possibility that this could have been from a wet market animal that was in Wuhan, China, and they say, well, it could have came from a bat. Well, that's possible. However, there's a lot of different theories right now that are trying to prove that wrong. So we won't get into the propaganda that floats around on that one. Indirect contact. You do not need direct contact with a person to become infected with something. Indirect contact can result in exposure to pathogens that will make you ill. So indirect means somebody that wiped their nose, that was sick, touched the desk that you were in the hour before, and it lived on that desk. You touched that desk, then you touched yourself. Contaminated objects, same thing. You touch a doorknob, somebody touched, okay, and then you touch it and touch an area of your face or mucous membrane. Okay, touching contaminated objects can also be picking up pathogens on your hands. It can be transformed into your nose, mouth, and eyes. To avoid spreading pathogens, wash your hands regularly, and it's been talked about quite often, but with antibacterial soap. Avoid touching your nose, mouth, and face as much as you possibly can, especially when you're not around an area where you can wash your hands. Okay, so the vectors, who passes certain things from one organism to the next. Well, pathogens are often spread by what's called a vector. Diseases that spread this way are called vector-borne diseases.
Vector, an organism that carries and transmits pathogens to humans or other animals.
Okay, so a vector could be an example of a carrier of something. Maybe we talked about Lyme's disease. Well, the vector would be the deer tick. Okay, contaminated food, water. When food is improperly handled or stored, harmful bacteria can develop. Okay, we talk about different things that can be, you can get sick from different things that you eat because it's not prepared correctly when you eat it. Water supply that comes from contaminated human or animal feces can also have an illness such as hepatitis A. Talk about contaminated water. Well, you want to talk about people that go to Mexico on vacation, they always say don't drink the tap water because your body's not used to it. Well, if somebody is from Mexico and lives in Mexico and their body is used to it, their immune system has built up an immunity to whatever's in that water, their body is not affected by it. But the cleaner water that you come from here in the United States, and then you go to drink the water down there, you're going to get sick. Okay, airborne transmission, we talked about that. When an affected person sneezes or coughs, pathogens are released into the air into tiny droplets, and you've learned a lot about that, I'm sure. They say those droplets can travel anywhere as far as about 10 feet. Well, they say social distancing right now should be anywhere from 6 to 10 feet away, and that's because once those droplets are released from a sneeze or a cough, that they should settle to the ground at a certain period of time after about 6 to 10 feet. Okay, other pathogens such as fungal spores are also small enough to spread that way. We talk about different things, whether it be a mold of some sort, and those spores get into the air. You can breathe that in, and people can get sick. Okay, so taking precautions. You can take steps to prevent infection. A few simple practices can dramatically reduce the risk of contracting communicable diseases. I think we're a little bit more scared nowadays, just because of the world that we're living in. But taking really good care of yourself and how you wash your hands and how you try to stay away from touching your face. I think at least for now the days of handshakes and things of that are going to be really, really, people need to be careful with the contact, especially people that they are not sure of. So I'm going to let you take a look at the last 3 slides here on your own. Talk about hand washing, vectors, and other preventive strategies, because I'm going to run out here in about 10 seconds. But we will continue on with these because I want to talk about more of these because of the world that we live in. Have a good day.